You come inside after stacking firewood, or maybe you were out in the garage turning a wrench on a cold engine block. It is January. The wind has been biting at your hands all afternoon, blowing hard across the frozen ground. You walk into the house and you go straight to the kitchen sink to wash up. You turn on the tap. The warm water hits your hands and it immediately stings. You look down at your knuckles. They are white, dry, and split open. The skin is tight, pulled like cheap leather over the bone. There are deep red fissures right where your fingers bend. So you reach for that expensive pump bottle of white lotion sitting by the sink, the one that claims it works for rough working hands. You push the pump. You rub that cold white cream into your cuts. It stings a second time. Your hands feel wet and slippery for about 5 minutes. You think you did something good for yourself. An hour later, you are sitting in your chair and your hands are bone dry. They are cracking all over again. The tightness is back. The pain is still there. Now I want you to sit with this. That bottle you just paid $10 for is mostly water and alcohol. The companies that bottle it know exactly what it does. They know it dries your skin out. The men who built the timber frame barns in this valley, the craftsmen who forged the iron tools we still use, they did not put alcohol on their bleeding hands. They used what they had, and they healed their skin. For about $5, you can make a solid, heavy balm right on your own stove. Pure beeswax and olive oil, a mixture that physically rebuilds the torn skin on your hands, and it works. My name is Levi Stoltzfus. I am Amish, and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Today we are going to fix your cracked hands. I will be honest with you right at the start, the way I always am. This balm we are going to make together does not absorb in 10 seconds. It is heavy. It is solid. It is a little greasy when you first put it on your skin, and it takes a good few minutes to soak in. But honest is better than impressive. If you are willing to wait those 5 minutes, you will never buy a plastic tube of lotion again. You will need one thing right from the beginning. You need to make sure you have 100% pure beeswax. The best place to get it is from a local beekeeper or a trusted source in your town. Do not buy the cheap paraffin wax from the craft aisle that is petroleum, and it will not do the work we need it to do. The English buy a lot of lotion that stings their cuts and evaporates into thin air. It is a strange thing to spend hard-earned money on. But why do the big cosmetic companies actually want you to experience what the doctors call transepidermal water loss? We will look at that later. First, we need to look at what you are actually pumping out of that bottle. If you read the back of a lotion bottle, the very first ingredient is almost always water. According to the government cosmetic ingredient data, standard commercial lotions are formulated with anywhere from 60 to 80% water. That is what you are buying. You are paying heavy prices for a bottle of water. Water is a wonderful thing for drinking. It is a terrible thing to rub into a cracked, bleeding knuckle in the dead of winter, because these lotions are mostly water. Sitting in a plastic bottle on a warm store shelf, they would turn green with mold in a week. To stop that, the factory has to pump them full of synthetic preservatives, things like parabens or phenoxyethanol. I do not know the chemistry names for all of them, but I know what they do. They kill the bacteria in the bottle and they irritate the torn flesh on your hands. You might think you need a lotion that advertises it, absorbs in 10 seconds without any greasiness. That is what the label usually says. It sounds nice when you have chores to get back to. But to make a cream disappear into your skin that fast, the manufacturers use high concentrations of volatile alcohols, things like SD alcohol or isopropyl alcohol. When you rub it in, the alcohol flash evaporates. It literally vanishes into the air. That gives you a dry, clean feeling almost immediately. But the dermatological science shows that this physical evaporation degrades your skin's natural protective barrier. It strips away the very oils your hands are desperate to hold on to stop paying for water, and to stop hurting our own hands. we have to understand what actually happens to your skin when that water and alcohol evaporates off your knuckles. It works like a wick. When you step back outside into the cold air, or even just sit in a dry, heated house, that surface water from the commercial lotion begins to evaporate. If you take a piece of dry pine board from the scrap pile, splash a cup of water on it, and set it out in the January wind, the water dries, but the wood does not get softer. The wind pulls the water out, and the wood splits right down the grain. Your skin is no different. The clinical doctors call this transepidermal water loss. I read a paper from the Journal of Clinical and Aesthetic Dermatology about this very thing. It is a long name for a simple destructive process. As the water from the lotion flashes off the surface of your hands, it does not leave empty-handed. It pulls the deeper, natural moisture out of your skin right along with it. It acts like a siphon. The evaporation drags the moisture from the lower layers of your flesh up to the surface and then gives it away to the dry winter air. That is why your hands feel tighter, drier, and more painful an hour after you put the lotion on than they did before. It literally robs you. You are locked in a cycle. You pump more lotion onto your cuts, feeling that brief 5 minutes of wet relief only to trigger the evaporation siphon all over again. The bottle sits on your counter, ensuring you have to reach for it every 2 hours just to tolerate the pain of simply bending your fingers. If water is the enemy of torn winter skin, we have to look at the oils our bodies naturally produce. We have to feed the skin what it recognizes. In our pantry, we keep a large dark glass bottle of extra virgin olive oil. It is heavy and thick. When you pour it, it runs slow, with a deep green-gold color. We use it for cooking, but its real value in the winter is what it does to human flesh. Your skin's natural oil is called sebum. It is the heavy grease your body makes to keep your joints moving and your skin from cracking open when you flex your hand around a shovel handle. That natural sebum contains about 12% of a compound called squalene. Olive oil is one of the highest plant-based sources of natural squalene on the earth. The nutritional science folks have measured this out. When you rub pure cold-pressed olive oil into your hands, you are providing the exact compound the human body naturally produces to stay supple. Your flesh recognizes it. My grandfather used to say, you cannot oil a dry leather draft harness with well water. It will just ruin the tack. You have to use neat's foot oil or heavy tallow. You have to use what the hide understands. Your own skin works the exact same way. It goes deeper than that. The International Journal of Molecular Sciences tested how this works on a cellular level. Extra virgin olive oil is made up of about 83% oleic acid. Stay with me. Oleic acid is a heavy monounsaturated fat. Because of its weight and its structure, it is able to physically penetrate the stratum corneum, that is the hard outermost layer of your epidermis. It is the part of your knuckle that splits open and bleeds. The oleic acid sinks straight through that dead dry layer and replaces the lost cellular lipids underneath. It packs the empty spaces between the torn skin cells with dense, nourishing fat. It is like packing fresh mortar into a crumbling stone wall. It binds the structure back together from the inside out. You might be thinking you can just pour a teaspoon of olive oil into your palms right now and be done with it. You can. I have done it when I was in a rush to get back to the barn. But pouring straight liquid oil on your hands is messy work. It drips down your wrists, it stains your shirt cuffs, and it rubs off on everything you touch, your steering wheel, your tools, the iron handles of your kitchen cabinets. Liquid oil sinks in, but it does not stay put. The cold air, the rough canvas of your work gloves, and the friction of the day's chores will eventually wear it away. We need a way to lock that deep green oil into the skin, so it stays there working for hours. We need a shield. We need something that hardens just enough to hold the oil, but breathes enough to let the living skin beneath it do its work. That shield is raw beeswax. I have a block of it sitting right here on the table. It is a dull yellow block, heavy in the hand, and hard as pine lumber. You cannot push your thumb into it. even if you press with all your weight. If you hold it up to your face, it smells faintly of summer. It smells of dried field clover, pollen, and raw honey. It is exactly the material the bees manufacture to seal their own hives against the freezing rain and the bitter winter drafts. They build it to protect the colony. We are just borrowing it to protect our hands. Long before the factories started putting things in plastic pump bottles, the old men knew how to use this wax. For thousands of years, right up until the invention of petroleum jelly back in 1859, farmers, builders, and tradesmen healed their deep winter fissures using what the old apothecaries called cerates. The word comes from the old Latin term cera, which just means wax. A cerate was nothing complicated. It was a simple, melted mixture of pure beeswax and heavy plant or animal oils. The timber framers and the stone masons used it. They worked barehanded in the freezing damp, handling rough oak and cold fieldstone from November until April. When their hands split open from the cold, they did not have a pharmacy to visit. They relied on those simple melted balms, kept in small tins in their pockets, to put their skin back together before the next sunrise. Today, folks try to take a shortcut. They go to the store and buy a cheap plastic tub of petroleum jelly. Petroleum jelly is a byproduct of the industrial oil refining process. It is the heavy residue left over after making fuel. It acts as an absolute occlusive. That means it seals your skin entirely. If you smear it over a cut knuckle, it is like wrapping your hand tightly in a piece of heavy plastic sheeting. Keeps the cold air out, yes. But the dermatology research makes one thing very plain. Petroleum jelly provides absolutely zero biological nutrients. It has no fatty acids. It offers nothing living to actually repair the damaged cells underneath. It just sits on top of your torn flesh, a dead slick of heavy grease, waiting to be wiped off on your shirt or your steering wheel. Beeswax is a living material. When you look at the botanical medicine studies, you see that beeswax contains natural wax esters. It carries cerotic acid and a compound called myricol palmitate. I do not worry much about the big words, but I care deeply about how they perform on a working farm. When you melt beeswax and apply it to your split knuckles, those compounds behave entirely differently than petroleum grease. They create what the doctors call a semi-occlusive barrier. That means the wax is breathable. It forms a durable, waterproof shell over your cuts, locking that deep green olive oil firmly inside the skin where it belongs. But it does not suffocate your pores. Your skin can still breathe beneath it. The natural moisture is trapped inside. The cold wind is blocked out, and the flesh can go to work, healing itself behind the safety of that natural wax shield. If you want to keep this recipe in your kitchen so you can make a batch before every winter, there is a guide down in the description that you can print out for your home. You can keep it tucked in a kitchen drawer and never have to guess the measurements when the first snow falls. Making the cerate is a quiet, simple job. It brings a good smell into the house on a cold afternoon. But you cannot just toss a block of hard wax and a cup of oil into a cast iron pan and turn on the stove element. I will show you how to melt this safely without starting a fire in just a minute. First, you need to gather your materials and you need to look at the exact cost. It takes very little to fill a jar that will last you from the first heavy frost all the way through the wet mud of spring. If you walk into a store today and find a premium 3-ounce tube of commercial working hands cream, you are going to pay a heavy price. Those little plastic tubes cost about $10 to $15. That is a lot of money to trade for a temporary feeling, especially when you are mostly buying water. By doing this ourselves, you can make an 8-ounce mason jar of this traditional beeswax and olive oil balm for roughly $5. It is a simple matter of gathering the right materials. I have them laid out here on the table. I take a glass measuring cup and pour out exactly 1 cup of that thick, extra virgin olive oil. That comes to about $3 worth of oil. Next, I need to measure out 1 ounce of pure beeswax. Sometimes I buy it from the beekeeper in little round pastilles, which are easy to scoop and measure. If I only had a solid block, I take a heavy kitchen knife and shave off flakes. The wax is stubborn. It resists the blade, crumbling into thick yellow curls on the wooden cutting board until I have a rough ounce. That much wax costs about $2. Then you need a vessel to hold it. I go to the pantry and find an empty glass mason jar. I just wash it out and dry it well. It costs absolutely nothing. Waste nothing. So for a $5 bill, you have enough heavy healing cerate to outlast the longest winter. Now we take these raw materials over to the stove. I put the 1 ounce of wax shavings and the 1 cup of olive oil straight into the cold glass mason jar. Axe Sadie word. Never put your beeswax or your oil directly into a metal pan on the stove element. Do not put it over an open flame. Beeswax and heavy cooking oils have a flash point. If you heat them too fast directly on the hot iron, they will smoke and then they will catch fire. You will have a terrible disaster in your kitchen, and burning wax is a very hard fire to put out. You must use what the old farm cooks call a double boiler method. It is very simple. You take a regular metal saucepan, the kind you would use to boil a few potatoes for supper. You pour about 2 inches of plain tap water into the bottom of the pan. Then, you set your glass mason jar, holding the oil and the wax, directly into the cold water. Turn the stove burner onto a medium-low heat. You do not want a rolling, violent boil. You just want to bring that water up to a gentle simmer. You want to see little bubbles rising quietly from the bottom of the pan, just enough to keep the warm water moving around the base of the glass jar. As the water warms up, it heats the glass gently and evenly. The heat transfers into the olive oil, and the warm oil begins to melt the hard wax. It requires a little patience. You just stand by the stove and watch. You will see the sharp edges of the wax curls start to soften and slump. Then they begin to dissolve into the dark green oil. I like to take a wooden chopstick, or just a clean peeled twig from the wood box, and stir the mixture slowly. You stir it until there are no solid lumps of wax left at the bottom of the glass. The green oil and the pale yellow wax will completely blend together. When the work is done, you will be looking at a beautiful, clear, golden liquid. The smell of warm honey and heavy oil will fill the kitchen. When the liquid is perfectly clear, you turn the heat off. You take an old, thick towel and carefully lift the hot glass jar out of the water. Set it down on a wooden cutting board to cool. Do not put hot glass directly on a cold stone counter, or the jar might crack. Now you just leave it alone. As the heat leaves the glass, you can watch the change happen over the next hour or two. The liquid right against the cold glass turns cloudy first. That opaque, pale yellow color creeps slowly toward the center of the jar as the minutes pass. The liquid firms up, pulling together, until it settles into a dense, solid paste. It will look a lot like a jar of firm, pale butter. When you touch the surface with your finger, it will not yield easily. It has become a true cerate. To use it properly, you have to prepare your hands first. You cannot just smear it on while you are standing out in the muddy driveway. You have to bring yourself inside to the kitchen sink, turn on the warm water, and take a bar of plain, honest soap. Wash your hands thoroughly, working up a good lather to get the grease, the grit, and the day's dirt completely out of the cuts. While your hands are still slightly damp from the towel, not dripping wet, just carrying the lightest trace of moisture from the tap, take a dime-sized amount of the heavy balm from the jar. It will be stiff. You have to scrape it backward with your thumbnail. Put that pale golden shaving into the center of your palm and rub your hands together. The natural heat of your own blood circulating in your hands will melt the wax and oil almost instantly. Work the melted cerate deeply into the cracks on your knuckles. Massage it into the rough calluses on your palms. It will not sting. There is no alcohol to burn the torn flesh. It just feels warm and soothing. If you have severe fissures, The kind that bleed when you close your fist around a hammer handle. You need to use what we do for the worst winter damage. We do it at night. You apply the balm heavily right at bedtime. Smear a thick layer straight across the bleeding cracks and then pull on a pair of plain cotton gloves. You go to sleep just like that. The cotton keeps the heavy grease off your bed sheets, but more importantly, it holds your own body heat against the skin. That trapped heat pushes the oleic acid deep into the damaged cells all night long. You will wake up the next morning, and those deep splits will be sealed closed. I will be honest with you about the limits of this jar. Because there is absolutely no water in our recipe, there are no chemical emulsifiers. Emulsifiers are the things factories use to make their creams feel light and ripped and fluffy. Without them, this is exactly what it looks like: a heavy, working person's salve. It will leave a glossy sheen on your hands for about 10 minutes. It is a little greasy at first. You will not be able to immediately go turn the pages of a book or type on a glass screen. You just have to sit quietly for a few minutes and let the skin drink it in. Also, remember what this is for. This repairs dry, cracked winter skin. If you are out in the shop and you get a deep infected puncture wound from a dirty nail or a slip of a chisel, you need proper medical attention. You do not need beeswax. You need a doctor. At the start of our time today, I told you the English buy lotion that stings their cuts and evaporates into thin air. I asked why the big cosmetic companies actually want you to experience that rapid evaporation, that transepidermal water loss. The answer is just simple cold business. The cosmetic companies know that if a bottle of lotion actually rebuilt the lipid barrier on your hands permanently, you would only buy one bottle every 5 years. They cannot build an empire on that. By filling their plastic pump bottles with 80% water and fast-drying alcohols, they guarantee your hands will be dry and itching again in exactly an hour. They are not selling you a lasting cure for your torn hands. They are selling you a strict cycle of dependency. They need you to squeeze that plastic pump 5 times a day, every single day, so you have to walk back into the store next month and hand them another $10. That is the truth of it. You have a choice now. You do not have to buy the water. Tell me in the comments, what kind of work do you do that makes your hands crack the worst? I read every single one. Next time, we are going to look at a $2 Amish trick to stop the cold drafts coming under your doors before the snow hits. We do not need to rely on fragile plastic bottles to heal our own flesh. The people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.